Scott, you're going to record?
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Surf and Sales podcast. I'm here as always with my friend Richard Harris, and today we are joined by Dale Dupree, famous sales leader, speaker, copier, warrior, copier guy, and founder of the Sales Rebellion. Dale, thanks for joining us today on the show.
Pleasure to be on the show. Thanks for having me, guys.
I'm a little jealous of the two guys right now. They're both in Florida, like, a couple feet from the ocean and the beach. Yeah. Although there's no waves in Key West that I know of.
Yeah. There's no waves here either. So
we could make some. I mean, if we like that attitude, man, there's no waves. Like, but we could make some, bro. If you wanted, make it happen.
So tell all the listeners, what the Sales Rebellion is all about. And like every time I see the Sales Rebellion, all I can think about is Star Wars. So I've just been dying to ask you, like, is this literally a Star Wars reference? Is this what it is?
You would love my keynotes and my presentations to teams, internally, because all throughout the slides are Death Stars and X-Wings, and it's a lot of fun, dude.
That's great.
And no, it's not, unfortunately. But what's really funny about that is that when I was 17, we got signed to a record label, the band that I played in. And the band's name was called The Red Letter. And there was actually a bunch of other bands that had Red or Letter, and it was actually, we named, the band was, I'm a man of faith. And so the band was actually based around the red letters, like Jesus's actual words in the Bible. Like in some translations of it, they would put red over the letters. And that was kind of my way of kind of creating a ministry around my music and not being super preachy to people, but having nuancing who I was and what I believed inside of everything that I did. And it's who I am to this day, right? But we had to change it. And so in the process of changing it, I thought, well, if we're going to change it, I want to have fun. And I love Star Wars. It's one of my favorite things in the world. I think that it's a big contributing factor to my creativity and who I am today. My mom was the first person to ever show me a Star Wars movie. And so I convinced the band to name all the members to name the band Imperial. And the thing is that I told them it was based around a Dolly painting that was like the Imperial something. And I swear to God, they all figured it out at some point, but I got them to say yes, bro. And that's all that matters. That is the ultimate sale that I've ever made in my life. And so
that's fantastic.
Nuancing that into the Sales Rebellion works just the same, right? So I'd like to tell people that I've trained Luke Skywalker and I'm way better than Yoda.
That's hilarious, dude. That's fantastic. What kind of music was it? You were in a band. You clearly, that's always a fun story. Well, sometimes it's sad for the musician too, but what did you play? What instrument? Were you a singer? Just give us a little more about you.
So I sang in the band, and we had a core group of guys in the beginning that ended up, we came down to 3 at a certain point. There were 6 of us in the beginning, and then at one point it was down to 3. But I like to play all the instruments. My mom took me to piano lessons when I was a kid with my sister, and then my dad bought me my first acoustic guitar. Told me if I learned it, I could play the electric guitar kind of thing, right? And then my dad ended up buying me a 12-string as well too at one point. So I just always had rhythm, right? And I could get on the drums and play and keep up with you. I wasn't the best drummer. I could get on the bass and play and keep up with you. I wasn't the best bassist, but what I was really good at was singing. And so I took the front spot of the band. And look, I mean, like, everything, you're all thinking it. I know you are. Like, you're like, this guy, like, this is the sales guy right here. Like, he's the front man of the band. He's making them name, the band things that like nobody even wanted to in the first place. Like, it's true. Judge me.
Rock and roll, folk. What was your genre? What was your band?
Oh yeah, my bad. It was heavy metal. And it was 2004 when we got signed and started touring and released our first album. We started around the year 2001. So imagine that era, not the 90s or the 80s version of metal, but like the metal that, like, if you had a kid playing metal, you were very worried for them.
Jeez. So sort of fast forwarding, but how did you go from, obviously the band thing decided not to work out for whatever reason. How did you end up choosing a career in sales, or did the career choose you?
So that actually dates back to my father. he founded he was a salesman, a copier salesman, actually started selling paper. So he was like Dunder Mifflin Ultra back in the 70s, like take Dwight and just throw him in the trash. Cause my dad was like the man. Right. So my dad was a salesman all my life. I grew up around that mentality, and I grew up around that work ethic, that passion, that desire to serve others in the community. And because of that, I always had it in me to be some type of salesperson to some capacity. But it really happened in 1984 when he founded his own copier firm. Because in 1985, I was born with toner running through my blood. So it was like destiny, bro. It was going to come back. And the idea in the copier world, we joke about this all the time in the copier world. It's like, once you're in, you're in. And if your dad had a copier company, you'll always be haunted by coffee machines, like forever and ever, or your mom, right? Because that what's great about the multi-generational side of it is that you find a lot of women owners in the copier world as well too, or they're running it with their husbands. It's actually a very like lucrative business, and the big piece of the puzzle is that it's very family friendly, believe it or not, even though it was like the scummiest place to sell, because you'd have the family up at the top trying to find the right salesperson, and they found them all right. I mean, they found like the literal worst human beings in the world would show up to the copier world and sell millions of dollars in revenue.
What does that mean? What does that mean? The worst person in the world? Like, give us an example.
Yeah, I'll break that down, because there's probably some people listening like, you're so unfair right now, Dale. Why are you so unfair? Listen, right. I'm super blunt and honest and black and white about things. That's really all it is. And so what I mean by that is that
But Dale, we want you to tell us how you feel. Please tell us how you really feel, Dale. That's how we do things at Serpent Sales. Don't hide behind this stuff.
Yeah, let me jump through this microphone right now. Hold on one second here. So this is the thing about sales that my dad always taught me. My dad taught me that sales is a very dangerous place to be. It's dangerous because it will test your ethics. It will test your morals. It will test the way you look at work. It'll test the way you look at community even. And then we have a choice every day in sales to rise above and to choose this concept of legendary, which is, it ties back for us, the sales rebellion, into legacy, or we can just be mediocre. And mediocre to me are the people that it doesn't mean that they're not selling a lot and making a lot of money. It means that they've chosen something that's easy, right? That path of least resistance. And in the sales world, the stipulation of, or really the stereotype of salespeople is that we all lie and we suck. I mean, that's what everybody thinks, right? My friend Adam Snyder, real good friend of mine, he talks about it all the time, these stories that he tells where he'll be at a party and someone says, oh, you're in sales, you must be really good at talking, or you must be a great liar, things like that. And I hear that kind of stuff and I get a little cringy about that in the first place. But for me, it was about understanding the role I was going into and the reputation of the role I was going into, and changing the game and coming at it from a completely different direction. But I had a great mentor, dude, my dad. My dad believed in the copier, right? He believed in the community. He was convicted on a daily basis to do right by people no matter what, right? Just talking about that today with a group of folks that I was with, about decisions inside of sales that we get constantly to lie a little bit, right? Or a lot of it. and the idea of choosing to rise above those things and not to play in that game.
Any without, throwing your dad or the company under the bus, but, any horror stories of a sales rep and what a sales rep did to move a ream of paper that you can share, just from the please people don't do it this way?
Bro, I can share stories from like 2 weeks ago, right? And I'm like, no joke. And honestly, guys, like the whole reason
I was trying to help us make the profession more noble. I was trying to make it be like, hey, you're right, Richard. That doesn't happen anymore with sales.
Yeah, right. Well, that's why we're having this conversation, right? I mean, honestly, that's why we're having this conversation, because we need to start to move it in that direction. And not to say that it hasn't to some capacity. I'm not trying to sit here and say
is the copier world sort of slower to adopt new kind of best practices?
It's like, imagine like going and buying a car in this day and age and like multiply that by 1 million, like just the terrible side of it. There's a lot of shady things that happen inside of certain industries, right? When they teach people how to, make everything free up front and then screw you on the back end. It's like getting your cable bill for the first time after you signed up for a $50 a month program, right? It's like $800. Like, oh, we forgot about the box that you got to buy. And, and we gave you HBO because you said you wanted it. We didn't tell you there was a price for it, right? There's all these different things that happen inside of the copier industry just the same, where, and again, I'm not going to say names, right? Like you said, but these are people that I'm connected to some capacity, and, hearing their stories directly or experiencing it. To be honest with you, I've experienced things just like this, but, how about reps sending themselves emails of signed paperwork, going in and whiting the signatures and the dates and some of the fine print, and then typing in using today's modern technology what they need it to say. So lying to the customer basically about what's going on.
I had a rep do that many years ago, long before I knew you, Scott, and we were selling educational software. And the beauty of it is he made fictitious POs. He would go in and just change like one number or one letter and photocopy and do that. But the irony of it all was that the people buying it were a prison. So here he is forging orders for educational software that are going to be used in a prison.
Yeah.
So these stories do exist, my man. They do exist. So anyway, so you left, but what made you? I mean, it was in your blood. It seems like you never really had to think about it in terms of like, oh yeah, I'll just go be a salesperson. Was it really for you? Was it that simple in your head?
No. I mean, I wanted to be a rock star. So to be it'd be easier for me to deny the emotions I truly felt and just kind of say, yeah, it was easy, right? Like, well, I wanted it, to an extent. Like, I wanted to be around my dad. He was my hero. He was my best friend. He was my mentor. I wanted to run the family business to some capacity. I felt a calling to do so. I loved what he had built. I loved the community that surrounded him. I loved his friends. I longed to be a part of that to some capacity, right? But in my heart of hearts, I was going to be a rock star, right? I was going to do that, and I struggle with self-worth, especially at that time. Today I'm much more of a champion of those types of disbeliefs of myself. But at the time, I wondered, am I good enough for this? And then when I do it, am I going to be faking it? Am I going to sit here and tell people like, oh, my dad's a really good salesperson, and depend on that my whole life? How do I overcome these things? And
you didn't want to be right? Tommy Boy, right?
Ripping biscuits up, yeah.
I want to ask you a question because I think this happens a lot. As I'm a father, I'm on the road at the moment. I travel a lot for work, and I'm very conscious of the relationship I have with my sons. Like I've made it an effort that when I travel, I don't, told Kathy this week, no more phone calls. It's all FaceTime. Even if it's with her, we need that little bit of FaceTime if I'm traveling with her or with the kids. What was your dad like? What is your dad like in terms of what are the things that made you so close to him? Because I think to the point, he's helped build a lot of character in you and of you because of him. What do you think makes a good dad? Just out of curiosity, for a dad in sales, even, or a mom. Let's even, because look, there's a lot of working moms out there too. Like it's not a gender thing at all. So
sure, I understand. Yeah. So for me, it would be the idea of just being present constantly. My dad in his sales role, he didn't separate them either. I want to also I want to be very clear about this. Actually, I don't believe in this idea of go to work from 8 to 5 and then be yourself outside of that. Like, I don't believe in this balance concept that people talk about. Because I watched my dad with conviction live this life of the opposite, which was that my dad and all of us knew exactly what he did for a living, how passionate he was about it, and how he loved the community in which he served. So like I even told a story today about I lost my dad in 2016 to cancer, and I gave the eulogy, and I stood up in front of over 1,000. This room held 900 people, and I mean there were like people standing on each other's heads, dude. I mean there was no seats, there was no standing, there was no lane, there was no nothing, right? The whole hallway through the back was just still people coming in, signing the book, getting through, trying to come and pay respects to a legend. And so when I think about a father that was truly inspirational, but also not just a good business person, right? But somebody that set the example for me and my siblings, and somebody that believed in us, and that was extremely intentional about their time with us and presence. Is that I remember my dad, even hearing some of the stories from people at the end of the funeral and fellowship with folks. I remember hearing stories like, yeah, I met you when you were, 6 years old. It was a Sunday afternoon, and your dad came to my office to help me, get a toner because I had to work late and I had an RFP due, and nobody would have done that for me. And he brought you because it was your day with him. And I remember those things too. I remember, late nights on Fridays where we'd go on dates with dad, and And, we'd get dinner and then he'd go, okay, we're going to go stop at this one place real quick. Right. And, you'd be there for 45 minutes helping him run copy jobs and, and
Right.
he'd give hugs when he got there. And so my dad wasn't just intentional, like with us, he was intentional with everybody. Right. And because of that, there was a balance. The balance was that my dad believed in the success of people while they walked this earth. My dad believed in eternity. He understood where he was headed, and it wasn't to some kind of fame or glory or victory from the perspective of retirement or what most people sit around and hope for one day. My dad truly believed that his time on this earth was sacred, every moment was precious, and he showed us that every day.
That's great. Did you ever, as a kid, get annoyed that you had dates with dad? Like, oh, dad, really? We got to go do that. Come on, dad. It's our night to go do dinner and a movie, or did you guys just sort of realize that's just who dad is at some point? And,
Yeah,
you were just happy to be with them.
At some point, you definitely realize it. In the beginning, honestly, like I never remember it bothering me. I think more or less when I was a teenager and I wanted to be, out with my friends watching movies and things like that. Like there's a rebellious stage no matter what in our lives, right? And I mean, it's the company name is also an ode to my father from the perspective of that in the process of the things that I was building for myself, I was creating my own rebellion, like a very altruistic one, though, one that was based around the concept of hope. The realism of what a rebellion is to me is that we all have this authentic walk, and my father was showing us his every day, right? We got to learn by example from that perspective. And so for me, what my dad was helping me to understand is that even though I wasn't happy to go out with him, he didn't say things to me like, you'll regret it one day when I'm gone, right? He didn't even think like that. My dad just met me where I was, always. Didn't matter what my attitude was that day, or if I was, changing, because I was becoming an adult, which is, pretty funny. You go from child to this weird thing and then become an adult. And it's
met you where you were. What's that mean?
My dad always met me where I was. My dad met me in my depression. My dad met me in my struggles with my faith. My dad met me when I was having a hard time with my girlfriend, who's now my wife. My dad met me in all these places. My dad met me in my addictions. Even my dad was always the guy that would meet me there. Right. He wasn't the guy that would stomp his foot down and say, how dare you? And you've dishonored the family. And my dad would meet me where I was and how I felt. Right. He didn't project himself into those things. He didn't say, you have to do it this way. He didn't say, I'll be here when you fall because I'll show you what you did wrong. Right. My dad was literally the leader that stood to the side, right to the side of me, to my left or my right, didn't matter. So that when I fell, he fell with me. When I had to crawl through the mud, he crawled with me, never complained about it, right? And he allowed me to work through those things myself. I think that one of the big pieces of the puzzle that my dad showed me, and I hope that my son feels this way too one day, is that, the leadership style in which we raise children is to understand that one day they will have their own mindset, their own ideas, their own dreams. My dad nurtured those things. My dad made sure that even in stuff he didn't really agree with, I mentioned the heavy metal band earlier, not to say my dad
was about
voiced
to ask.
disagreement, but my dad took me to the concerts, dude. And he never, and listen, like there was things that happened in those instances that were weird, like people dropping F-bombs on stage. And I'm 13 years old and my dad's like, and they're smoking weed. And, my dad's probably thinking to himself, this isn't too good, but he never said anything about it. He never embarrassed me with it. He would just ask me like, hey, what'd you think of this? Right. He would meet me there. He would get my opinion. He would allow me to be expressive. And then he led by example, right? He showed me how to treat a woman like a queen, right? By his example to my mother, right? He didn't tell me this is the way you do it, and that's really what I mean by meeting me where I was at, and I think that every father should have that in mind when they're looking at their child, whether it's a male or a female, son or daughter. You have to look, and like for me, I want a daughter one day, and I don't know if you two gentlemen have daughters, but I want a daughter one day, and I already know that it's not going to be easy because I can't think like a woman, and I'm going to be madly in love with this young lady, and she's going to be 16, worried about makeup and boys, and I'm going to be like, I need a loaded gun right now is all I needed. Like,
No, Scott and I, we lucked out. We only have to pay for 2 rehearsal dinners.
Nice.
We don't have to pay for the wedding. So, but in a terribly gender dynamic world, but it's a joke, people. Relax. Can't get it. Don't listen.
One of the things that I find interesting about you, Dale, is that you have kind of grown up inside of this one very particular niche industry, and it's not, you know, SaaS, and it's not software. But how have you managed to bridge the gap, or how have you managed to transcend industries? How have you gone from just, you know, and I don't mean to minimize what you've done, but like, how have you gone from just being in the copier business, right, to making an impact on salespeople all over the place, regardless of industry? What talk to us a little bit about that journey, and like what's been some of the tricky moments to navigate?
Yeah. So when I first started writing my book, and I have a book, and then I have an origin of the book. And the origin was that when my father was diagnosed with cancer, I started writing his story, his and my story, because I didn't know how long I was going to have at that point. I hoped that he would be cured and he would fight through it and live. But 3 years later, he was gone. And during those times, I started to spell out like my daily routine, you know, what was happening from my perspective, what I could gain from his perspective. I was telling stories. I was, you know, again, giving experiences. And I realized in the process of that I wasn't talking about how to sell a copier necessarily. And those stories and the things that I was building in that memoir, which I'll give you an exclusive right now. When I finally release it, it's going to be Memoirs of a Copier Salesman, Blood, Sweat, and Toner. And it's going to be an ode to my father's business and the legacy in which he built. And inside of those stories, though, Scott, I realized that what I really had done for myself was what all salespeople need to do to build a foundation, to understand the basics of human psychology, of human behavior. What is a story? How do we tell it? Why is it important? Why do we need to look at the neurological side of our genetic makeup? And just us as humans, you know, 99% of humans are all made the same, right? Why are we so different? How do we look at these things, make sense of them for different verticals, and create a system that works for anybody? And that's really where the foundations of the rebellion come from. And that's how I worked through it in my head.
Was it scary for you at all? Did it feel like, you know, you were pushing yourself and going outside of your comfort zone, or was it much easier than that because you had this, you know, foundation?
I should have told you that you were like, at the beginning, you're like, for all the listeners, Scott says, anything off limits? I should have been like, please don't throw me hard, you know, super hard fastballs. Come on. So I'll tell you straight up, let me be extremely vulnerable here. It is one of the hardest and scariest things you will ever do, to sit down and write out what it is that your dream looks like and your passion on paper, how that is translated, because you will immediately think to yourself, what will others say about this?
Or you immediately think, holy shit, I'm really far away from that.
Yeah, one or the other, right?
Yeah,
for sure, 100%. But both of those thought processes, they're toxic. They have no place in your life. And it's good to question things from an intellectual standpoint or from a process standpoint, from the respect of, could I get better at these things? Could I change the messaging a little bit to be less self-righteous or self-centered or self-serving, and help others more? And I think that's what I started to come to realizations on, more so than beating myself up or you know, falling to imposter syndrome in the process, is that I started to sit back and say, well, really, what I need to be focused on is, how is someone else going to read this? That's what I really need to be focusing on. How is another human being going to read, dissect, and then digest this information? And so in the process of creating those things, you know, I started to realize, even because look, the one thing about the copier industry we don't talk about is that the amount of people that I did business with, right? Furniture salespeople, moving and storage companies, IT firms before the copier industry adapted to that and adopted it and started becoming you know, MSPs, right? I was learning these people's businesses, financial advisors, you know, like, what's your cycle look like? How are you talking to people? And I started to realize that it's funny how we all, like, when we get into a vertical and we're in sales, that we're like, this is how you do it, you know? And
yeah, you get real myopic with it. Yeah,
100%. So I really realized in the process of that we need to stop making sales so complicated. You know, because I had done something extremely basic and then taught other people the basics of it, right? And the things that are hard about it is the work ethic behind it. You have to go out of your way to create a transformational marketing piece instead of just getting on the phone and making a cold dial, right? You have to go out of your way to do shit like that. I'm sorry if I'm not allowed to use language, my bad. I get passionate, guys. So, but you have to really commit to these things. And so what I realize is that more than anything, we're speaking to the personal development of a human being when we tell them about how they should be interacting as a salesperson, more so than the activity itself and the tactic.
That makes a ton of sense to me. I can remember, this is years and years ago. I don't know if I've ever told you this story, Richard, but when I was first going to grad school, I was 23 years old, and it was my first semester there. And I can remember the dean of the department sort of asked me like what I wanted to do. And I told him that I wanted to help people. And at the time I was thinking I would get into like corporate training and go down that route. It had nothing to do with sales in my mind, but I thought like, well, my dad is a teacher. Like I really like the idea of helping people and kind of coaching people and things like that. And he was like, man, you might be in the wrong place, because business and sales is not really about helping people. And I'll never forget that. And I've sort of spent the last 20 years, like kind of thumbing my nose at that guy who told me, maybe sales and maybe business is not the right path to go down. But it really is. Like, sales is an opportunity for all of us to work on all the things that we have going on, overcome all these difficult challenges, transform your life, and when you give it back, transform the lives of others. And that's really one of the most powerful things, that you can do as a human in this world.
You should call them out, mention it. It's ASU, right? And then we'll send them this to say, thanks for helping me build my career around something I didn't believe you told me, right? You could thank him anyway, right? Because that has stuck with you for 20 years, which is amazing.
Yeah,
so
indirectly, apparently.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'll chime in on that real quick for the listeners to get real deep. Is that's the concept that we were just talking about, of meeting people where they're at, like to be able to just forgive that man and even ask for forgiveness in the process is a super healing piece of the puzzle for us as humans. In most cases, we're afraid of that kind of stuff, and not that anybody on this call is, right, but there are people listening, and there are people that I coach, and there are those of us that have been doing it for 20 years and haven't figured that part out yet, because we were cultured differently, right? My dad was empathetic. My dad cried. My dad was not this tough guy, although he beat the heck out of you if you touched any of us, or right. I mean, he had a reputation for it when he was younger too, but when he found his faith and denounced alcohol, he was an alcoholic up until 35. He became a different man, and that's the man I knew. I was only a year and 4 months old when my father found sobriety and found the Lord, and so I lived this entire lifestyle of understanding a leader that I would watch him go to people and ask for forgiveness, right? And when I was thinking, even as a young adult, like, this person owes you an apology, Dad. Like, let's be real, right? But I found so much power in that and that concept, and that when people are softened through those types of things, the real truth comes out inside of them, right? Like, why did your leader feel that way about business? You want to know? You just go and apologize to him for the way you felt about him for 20 years, and he'll tell you straight out, like, dude, yeah, I was abused. I was addicted to drugs, whatever it is, right? Like, it's wild, the stories that come out, but that, like you were saying a little bit ago, is that's the human connection side. That's what makes us stronger as a community.
Not to minimize how many folks are like that in other disciplines and professions, but I have always said that sales is like a garbage can of jobs. It's just like collects other people's trash, right? And here we are in this bin, and yet many of us find our way out of it and make something of ourselves. And then I think more and more now people are talking about the need to give it back and to help and uplift others and teach others. Any sales floor across the country is filled right now with people who are struggling with addictions and regular decision making in life and all sorts of challenges. It's a really powerful platform, I think, for people who are passionate about making an impact on others. And I know enough about you and your story that is kind of ever present and always at the top of your mind.
So yeah, so Dale, I want to touch on this a little bit. I did not know your story of struggles with drugs or alcohol and those things. So congratulations on managing through that and working through it every day. And certainly I lost my father a few years ago, so I totally understand what that's like. Um, you know, one of the things that I'm hearing from you, though, sort of underneath all this, is you got to do things to keep yourself healthy, right? You got to do things, whether it's in your sales or in life, like you need to take, I call it mental health or mental well-being. For me, it's, seeing a therapist or seeing, or doing meditation. I've heard you allude to faith quite a bit. Is that your happy place when you can take time and just think about your faith, and that's how you, because we all have our bad days, right? How does Dale handle a bad day?
Yeah, I proactively approach every day from a positive perspective. And, you can always feel them coming on the night before even, especially, if you struggle with things like depression, like I do, or I should say, I'm trying in 2020, I'm trying to proclaim victory over my depression. It's one of my resolutions for myself. All my resolutions start on my birthday every year, September 9th. The day I came into this world. I don't really believe in January 1st. Like, I'm going to cut weight. When I get to my birthday, I'm like, all right, I'm another year old. Like, what's changed and how am I getting better? And so I decided that I wanted to start to proclaim victory over that. And I think that that's the mindset that people need, is that they need this idea, like you believe in God, you believe in yourself, you believe in some type of God, the universe, it's the idea of connecting with something that's bigger than you more than anything that will help you to understand just how small your problems are to begin with, and just how much power you truly have over them if you recognize and embrace them, and instead of trying to skirt around them, and so my father was an alcoholic. My brother has struggled with things in that genre for some time as well in his life, and my brother and I are best friends. And I know he doesn't mind me giving a little bit of information away about him, but I'm going to leave it at that. But the difference between me and my brother is that when my dad died, even, and I started to just drink way too much and started to become a little overweight even in the process, and it was affecting my mental health even further, I was able to sit back and realize, like, this is not good. Like, this is something that needs to change. And so my style, my genetic makeup, I should say, allows me to flip a switch, right? And so I remember when I quit smoking cigarettes in 2011, so I've been, here I am smoking cigarettes since 2001, 2002, somewhere in there, when I started playing music. 2011, I'm up in Tennessee with some friends and my wife, and I had been smoking all the way up the drive, the 10-hour drive from Orlando. I've been smoking cigarettes the whole way up. And I got out of the car. It was like 1 a.m. Everybody's getting out. They all smell like smoke. And I took that pack of cigarettes and I threw it in the trash. And I'd only smoked like 5 out of the pack, right? And everyone was like, "What'd you do that for?" Right? And I said, "I quit."
Yeah.
And that was it.
That's one of the things that I believe, that I think a lot of other people don't believe, is that change happens in an instant. And I think a lot of people think that change takes time. And the story that you're talking about, I can relate to. I was in the hospital for 4 years dealing with all sorts of physical illnesses, had major surgeries, and was fighting for my life for 4 years. And through that process, I was on narcotics and opioids and medicine for 4 years. And so by the time I got physically well, now all of a sudden I had to deal with an opioid addiction. And I cold turkeyed. I signed all this paperwork in the hospital, like, against doctor's orders. I told them, "No way, man! Like, I'm done." And and that was it. And I was done. And I know it's not that simple sometimes for everybody, but I'm a huge believer in, if you want to change something bad enough, it's just the power of that. You sticking to it, sticking with it, is really important. And whether it's quitting cigarettes, quitting drinking, or changing your lifestyle. And your goals, whatever it is, like, I really believe that we can change, in an instant rather than gradually over time. So,
agreed. I'm on board with that thought, and I think that we use the concept of time as a crutch too often, and that we have to start saying this. We have to say it to the young men and women of the next generation, especially, because the more that we do, and we create this aura around something that's extremely false and untrue. It's a lie. The more that we do that, then the more that we enable this mindset of toxicity. The more we take people down this path resistance is really what it begins to be at some point. Like, oh, I just need another year. I just need, and then you're 55 saying the same thing, right? We should be striving toward decimating the things that harm us in our life on a daily basis. You know, there's a lot of people that struggle with more than just the substance side of things too, right? There's people that struggle with, you know, all kinds of different subjects that they're afraid to talk about, because a lot of people say like, oh no, that's actually not a struggle. That's okay. That's just you being yourself, right? And like, that's not the truth at all either. So, you know, I think at the same time, it's like inside of this instance of change happening, you'll be attacked from all angles.
Yeah.
Everybody and their mom.
And people hold on to the old versions of themselves and the old narratives that they've created. They say things all the time like, oh, that's just how I am, right? Oh, I'm so, you know, I'm so this, I'm so that. Like, we got to get people to believe and understand that, no, that's not who you are. That might be how you've been, but how you've been doesn't have to mean that's who you're going to be forever.
Yeah. I'd like to, you know, I think we've all been through stuff. You know, Scott knows my struggles on whether it's food and sugar and you know, my own depression. Dale, I'm more than happy to chat with you about. I think you'll be the first person I say this to. I would love for you to come back on, and I think the three of us should have a deeper discussion around this stuff too, because I mean, we could go on for an hour that I think people would really, really love, and give people more, you know, more hope and faith and all those kinds of things. Because I think it'd be an amazing discussion, and yeah, it relates to sales in a lot of ways. So, but I do, you know, super appreciate you sharing your story, man. Like, that's amazing.
My pleasure. Yeah, it's my pleasure.
So, you know, we always sort of turn this around at the end of our podcast and turn it around and go, so Dale, what can we help you with, right? How can we help you? You've given us, you've given to the audience. What can we help Dale with?
You know, I think that question always throws me off. Not the way you ask it, actually. The way you ask it is awesome. But there are people in this world that think that just like asking that generically, that it works somehow. But because I know your heart and I know what it is that you want to accomplish and what you guys stand for, it makes it so much easier to have an answer even prepared, you know, in my head, because I know that y'all will get this. To help Dale is to help the community in which I believe that I'm serving and that I long to be in front of on a daily basis, right? The people that we're talking about right now, those that are lost and struggling in sales, those that are broken by sales, you know, bring me your weary, right? I say that all the time. I say it to leaders especially. I look forward to helping people like that recognize their true potential, the power in who they are and their authenticity. Whether it feel like a weakness or not, there's a truth that lies behind it that most people need help to understand. You know, so to help me, you know, the best answer I could say is help me build my rebellion. My rebellion is a movement. It's not about the sales rebellion as a training and you know, coaching firm. It's about, from the sales perspective, it's about making people better. It's about your life, right? If you chose sales, awesome. We love that you chose sales. We believe that everybody is in sales at the Sales Rebellion. You know, my book talks about that more. That's dropping in a couple months. You know, but if we looked at things more from the perspective of that, then it would be easier for us to find cohesion between one another and not look at people with titles and look at people with stereotypes, you know, preemptively. You know, so for me, the thing that I believe that would help all of us, right, by helping me is to build this rebellion alongside me. And it's not like send them to this website and sign up for $99. It's about the mindset. It's about the thought process. It's about changing the game for sales. It's about starting to choose to give our prospects an experience. It's about taking culture and community and making that greater than commission checks. It's about treating people like a human being, right, instead of a transaction. It's about getting away from this concept of product over those people at the same time too. How can I push this thing? How can I make this work? How can I get this sale because I have to hit my quota? How about you just don't? How about you just help? How about if it's not the right fit, it's not? And how about in the process of doing so, you connect with someone, right? That you serve them, that you take this leadership action of servanthood, you know, as a member of a community that's very large. There are a lot of salespeople out there. Right. And a lot of them subscribe to the people that are popular these days. That, you know, I've got a video that just popped up on my LinkedIn that a friend of mine, Dusty Rollins, one of the most amazing men that I know. He's somebody that I've worked with. He literally made a video for me. Right. and it's very well produced. And it's him telling the story of what I've done for him. And dude, I watched that thing and you literally couldn't talk to me for 5 minutes because it broke me. And that's what, dude, could you imagine if all of the salespeople on this earth were seeking that type of outcome? Who cares how much they pay? Who cares if they even buy? What kind of impact are we having on people? And what did they get out of it? So to help me is to help the community.
Yeah, I love that. And I think, I feel like
there's so many snippets in there.
Yeah, I love that. I feel like I'm certainly trying to do that. I think that, whether I realize it or not, hopefully you agree that I feel like I am part of the sales rebellion. I'm sure Richard does.
Likewise.
And,
I'll be an Imperial Stormtrooper for the
Y'all
sales
are definitely
rebellion.
rebels. Y'all are rebels.
I know you're going to be in Austin soon. And when you're in Austin, let's go grab some barbecue or something and hang out and catch up. It's always good to talk with you, man.
Yeah, for sure, man. And if anybody's listening to this and they're going to be in Austin in March as well, too, they should send us direct messages and come fellowship with us. SDRs, account executives, receptionists. Come on, let's hang.
Yeah.
That's awesome, dude. Man. I love it.
Appreciate
Dale, this is going to be one of our best. This is going to be one of the best episodes. I can already tell. You've been a tremendous. We appreciate you, man. Like I want to have you back on soon. So I could just sit and listen to you all day. I could literally just sit and listen to the Dale Dupree podcast all day long. So
thanks, Richard. Thanks a lot, man.
Yeah. Thank you, Dale. We really appreciate it. Thanks for sharing all your stories and whatever you need, we're always here.
Yeah, appreciate you guys very much.
All right. Till next time, everybody. Yeah.